I don't know about you, but I sometimes feel like I'm trapped in a cycle of limiting beliefs and I have a really hard time breaking out of it. It's like my dreams are being smothered by self doubt and negative thought loops. On this episode of the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast, we sit down with the extraordinary Finnian Kelly, who's a former wealth manager and entrepreneur turned intentionality coach and author. And he is literally walking the walk when it comes to radical life transformation. He's here to tell his remarkable story and to share the powerful principles of intentionality that have reshaped his world. In this episode, you'll learn the power of breath work to break the persistent negative belief loops that can hold us back, why it's important to prioritize feelings over outcomes, how to develop an expansive mindset, and how to break out of the ordinary and feel extraordinary every day. Get ready for an inspiring ride through the realms of self-discovery and personal growth with Finnian Kelly on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast. Hey, Finnian Kelly, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast.
It's a privilege, Alex. It's also awesome to see how the success has been. We connected when you first had this concept, and now 3 years later, you've got a great conference coming soon. I hear tickets are selling amazingly.
They are, and I'm really excited about that. I'd like to think it's because of the intention that we've put behind the event, and certainly look forward to talking about that with you here today. I'd like to kick off the conversation because you have had many, many parts to your career. You've had a long and interesting journey that I'd love to hear more about. And in particular, I want to hear about how you went from wealth management services in Australia, I believe, to now being an author and intentionality coach in Colorado. What are the common threads there, and how did that story unfold?
Well, it all started really from a position where I was in school, and I had the traditional path of becoming a doctor, and that's what my friends were doing. And it just didn't feel authentic to me. I knew there was something more. And I didn't know what that was. And actually, how I made a decision was what could potentially be cooler than being a doctor. So it was very ego based. And I became an army officer, and I got selected as a helicopter pilot in the army. And that was 7 years. And although it wasn't the right path for me, it was exactly where I needed to be, because it got me out of being a doctor and it got me out of being in Tasmania, a small little island in Australia. And then when I retired from the military, I had a lot of leadership experience. I had from 20 years old, I was in charge of up to 100 people. So you learn a lot at a very young age. And I knew I wanted to do something on my own. And I saw an opportunity to start up a wealth management business. I had a very detailed academic career. I had a maths degree, a physics degree, teaching, finance. And I met a woman who I ended up marrying and starting a business together, who was in the financial advice space. And I just saw an opportunity. We both did. And we set up a business 6 weeks after we met and had a really successful private wealth management firm. And I look back, because I was 24 when I started that, and it was very audacious, but I had some principles. And it flows through to where I'm at right now, because I've always been very principle based. I've always had a strong philosophy, and I've been confident with my message. And that's really creates a lot of confidence in others. And ultimately at that time, it was going through a global recession. Everyone was nervous, and I was out talking when everyone else was retreating. So there was an opportunity there. And then we had success, and we suffered a little bit of the entrepreneurial challenge of sort of different opportunities would come up and we would jump onto them. So we set up we saw a lot of people our age needed, and we were obviously in our 20s, millennials, needed help. And we became the first financial advice and coaching company for millennials in Australia. And we really paved the way for the industry of where it is now. We did a lot of good work. And we also set up a global recruitment company for remote workers. And this was 18 years ago. No, 18, yeah, 15 years ago now. So it's like quite impressive looking back into it. The challenge was, there was a few things. One, it was great because we got diversity, but the problem is we hadn't built enough strength in the individual companies, so they were individually run by different leadership teams. And I've learned a lot about that in hindsight, that sometimes it's better just to focus on one thing and really build momentum. So then we actually sold a couple of financial companies, moved over to Colorado, and that was purely a very personal decision. It was, we would come skiing every year for 4 days, 1 week, 2 weeks. And I remember this one day at Beaver Creek, Colorado, I just had the best day ever. And my smile was so large and I was so happy. And I just reflected, I went, I'm always happy in the snow. And so why am I only doing this 1 week of the year? Why don't I make my life around skiing? And I said to some people that I'll come back next year and I'll move here. And I was actually part of the entrepreneurs organization. So I met a lot of the EOers in Colorado, and it made it a lot easier because I already had a community, and I sold a company, turned another one remote, and then moved literally a year later. So a lot of people went, did you move for business? And I went, no, it was purely lifestyle. And then I had a period of my personal sort of awakening experience where I achieved everything that I wanted in my life and the illusion came crashing down. I thought that when I received all this, I'd suddenly feel whole and happy and really fulfilled and peaceful. But instead, the opposite happened. So I had to go through the typical hero story of dismantling everything to discover what really matters to me. And that's really where it led me to a path of intentionality. What was interesting was I already was, if I look back at my previous companies, they were built with intentionality, and it was never about just making money. It was always about how did this money translate to your life? So I was already doing it, but it was limiting through the financial structure. It's a very, you talk about social conditioning, the financial structure is very strong, very powerful, and it limited what I could do. So then I branched out and went, well, how do I just do this in a totality of a philosophy? And really, it was all built out of my own need. I really needed this myself personally. And people saw my own transformation and then they started asking for help. I had no intention to making this into my life's work or business. It was only after enough people who I really respected kept saying, can you take me through this? Can you teach me this? And now we're in a place where I've built a large movement. I have a book coming out with Hay House in June. I coach some of the top entrepreneurs in the world. I speak to some of the top audiences in the world, and it's a real privilege that I get to do this meaningful work every day.
That's so cool. That's such a great story, and I just want to reflect back that this is something I've heard from a lot of different entrepreneurs. Is, we start out with this if then thinking. The if then thinking basically says, when I sell my company, raise $10 million, do this or do that, then I will be happy. Then I will relax. Then, I will do all the things I'm meant to do in the world or whatever. And so we have this really funny orientation around that. But even just to hear you talk about your experience, that I want to understand some of the context a little bit better, is, look from the outside. Here's a super successful person, young, so you got all the future ahead of you, achieving your life's work, sold company, you've got the resources, you've checked everything off the list, right? I'd imagine your list at that point was getting a lot shorter because you've done a lot of great stuff. And then you get here and you say, hey, then I had to go through my realization. Then I had to go through my awakening and find out who I really was. So what were the things that you learned going through this?
There was a few things. So what I realized, there was really, and this is the core of my book, is there's really three main premises. Is we are born with everything we need to build the life we're searching for. And when I mention that, it really comes down to our breath, which is something we all have, and access to the universal mind, which is this field of energy that all intelligence comes from. And I really want people to focus on this is because a lot of people have a bit of a victim mindset, and there is truth. There's a lot of inequality in the world. But the one equalizer is we all have access to these two things. So that was a big part. And they were on my journey. I kept coming back to the breath and coming back to this infinite intelligence. The second piece is what we're all looking for really in that what life we're wanting to build is we're searching for a feeling. That was my biggest awakening moment. There was one day where I was so just miserable and so sad. And I woke up one day and I said, I never want to feel like this again. And that's when the light bulb went on. I went, whoa. Notice how I didn't say, I never want to think like this again. It was, I never want to feel like this again. And that's when I flipped everything in my life's work. I started realizing, that's what we actually need to focus on. Feelings are what we're hoping an outcome or a materialistic achievement will give us, but it doesn't guarantee it. So we need to flip it and prioritize feelings over outcomes, which is the actual master key intention of intentionality. And then the third is we all have choice. What I realized is we have choice about how we live our life, how we take agency of our life. And ultimately, in that moment, I had to take complete responsibility, and I need to stop looking at other people, blaming other people, and go, this is my life. How do I want it to look like? How do I want to feel like? And that's how I've lived my life ever since.
Fantastic. And the point about agency or choice is about the idea that you can shift your own mindset. You don't have to wait for permission from someone else. You don't have to wait for external circumstances to change. You can own, where am I right now? What am I accepting? What am I willing to live with? And what is it that I want to change? And then what sort of deliberate action or purposeful action can I put behind that change? And so that's such a powerful thing to get out of, passive mode, or as I think I've heard you describe before, to get out of the passenger seat and into the driver's seat of life, right? Is that the first step along the way?
It is. And it's actually the moment of liberation, but can also be very challenging. When the sooner you acknowledge that you have contributed, whether subconsciously or consciously, to every circumstance in your life, the better off you are. Now, that moment will probably cause you a lot of friction within you, because you'll be saying, well, how could that have happened when I got abused as a child? How could that be my fault? It wasn't that you consciously did it, but there was some form of subconscious program which attracted that. Now, at the same point, when you might be feeling friction, if you can lean into that, you actually realize that's a moment of liberation, because then it completely empowers you, and you realize you can start really writing your own story. Because ultimately, life is built on your beliefs. And what are beliefs? Beliefs are just stories. So why not write a better story for yourself? If you haven't had a great experience in the past, and we see this a lot with entrepreneurship, a lot of people get stuck in their story around their failures or how this wasn't possible. And instead, you could flip it and go, oh, wow, that wasn't a failure. That was like my greatest learning experience. And because of that, it got me into this path. But so many people get trapped by their previous experiences. So I always say, just like, write your own story, flip it. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to approach it. And I always find, because sometimes I get stuck in these doom loops of like, oh, nothing is ever going to work out, and all this kind of like terrible things. And then if I zoom out and I look at a much longer timeline, a different perspective of it, then I'm able to see, okay, here's where I am, here's where I've been, here's the curve and what it looks like, as opposed to when everything feels urgent and like the sky is falling in, on one particular day. So I think being able to zoom out or shift the thinking there, write your own story, is an incredibly helpful tool.
Yeah, Alex, and you would have seen this from interviewing people, and I've done it with working with thousands of YPOers and EOers. When we look back at their life story, their biggest like challenging moments, their traumatic moments, they always look back and go, oh, that was my most transformational moment of my life. This opened up this. And they often say, if you said like, would you go through that again? They would be like, yes, I'd 100% go through that again. So we know this to be the case. So we need to change our experience when we're in the present moment. We're feeling that friction. How could we transcend it? And then it's actually like the law of polarity. Like, how could you transmute it above and go, oh, this is actually a good thing for me? Now, it doesn't mean it's not going to be hard and it's not going to cause friction, but you can go through it with such different ease. And in a weird way, you start celebrating friction, because you start going, oh, this could be my transformational moment. And that really changes everything for you. And then you may be able to see the opportunities through it. A really valuable way to highlight this is whenever you're going through a hard time, write down, all right, this is what's happening for me right now. Potentially write down like, what could be some of the positives of this? So you're already starting to put yourself in an expansive mindset, because most of the time we're just focusing on the negatives and we don't realize there could be lots of positives here. So you start writing that out. Then leave a column empty for what did come out of this. And 3 months, 6 months down the track, come back to this column and start writing out the good things that did come from it. And once you start seeing a pattern, you'll be blown away. And every moment you'll be realizing, oh, this isn't bad. Because what is bad? It's It's a story. Like there's no such thing as bad or good.
Right.
It's all our perspective, and that's what I've really learned that life is. Life is just about perspective.
One of my mentors, a well-known coach and someone who's spoken at the Conscious Entrepreneur Summit in the past, is Dr. Sri Kumar Rao, and he has a great way of just coming back to this and saying, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" And if we just get in the habit of reminding ourselves, "Good thing, bad thing, who knows?" When anything is going bad, or when it's not, or when it's going well, right? Like either side, the point is, the universe is full of potential. It's full of opportunities. With experience, we're going to come back and reframe or look at something in a different way. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I want to talk for a second about your book. So you've got a book coming out June 18th, I believe, published by Hay House. So congratulations. They're a great publisher, great company to be working with. It's called Intentionality, a groundbreaking guide to breath, consciousness, and radical self-transformation. This is based on your experiences as you've gone through your career in life, Finnian. But tell us what are we going to learn from this book in terms of things like tapping into our emotional operating system, or letting go of limiting beliefs, or kind of recoding the things that are going on in our mind. Tell us what we can expect with this work.
Well, you summarized it really well, actually. So it is a combination of my personal experiences, but also from people I've worked with. And what I identified is that there's really 5 core negative belief loops that people operate with. And I can talk about them a little bit now. And what I created was these 5 antidotes, these 5 key intentions that if you focus on, they're sort of the loophole to, and that's what you spoke about to me previously before the call, the loophole to that program, that conditioned program. So effectively what I do is I go through this journey. The first part is all about your system. And I talk about how we have our breath, very important part. We have our universal mind, the subconscious mind, and the conscious mind. And then we have our chakras or energy systems and the ego. This is what the making up of how we live our life. And a lot of people aren't aware about how what they think they actually want isn't what they really want. It's a conditioned program. Then I go through the 5 main conditioned programs that I've seen, and we talk about how to actually recode through repetition, because our subconscious gets coded through repetition. So the way to actually recode is one way is through repetition. Yeah. Then we go into energy interventions, which are using a lot of energy in a short amount of time to like clear the system, which is another way to recode. And I talk a lot about all my different experiences with these different energy interventions, with breath being the most powerful. And I use breath throughout the book to talk about breath is the one thing that we all have access to at all times. It's free, it's available to us, and it's also the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious mind. So that tells me it's the one thing that is there to help us become more aware. So I bring up this concept of circuit breakers, and circuit breakers are there to help us prevent energy coming from the outside world, short-circuiting ourselves and disconnecting ourselves from our higher self. So we activate the circuit breaker, and I have lots of different breaths to be able to do that, to help you go, ooh, take a pause. I don't want to react with that old subconscious program. I want to consciously drive a new behavior to get a particular feeling. Yeah. And so I basically go through a process of recoding. So as you're reading this book, it's going to be a journey of interest. You're going to be like, wow, this is really fascinating, hearing different people's stories. But at the same time, you're going to be actually recoding your subconscious programs to help you get ultimately a more expansive life.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
It's a very practical book.
Such a gift. And I want to ask you about the 5 key intentions of intentionality. But before that, I'll just say, as I'll comment, and we'll get to breathwork again in a bit, but like, breath is one of these things that you can either do consciously or unconsciously. And so it's so great to hear you talk about it being a bridge between the two, because I can just sit here and I'm breathing, or I do a program like yours, or I do something like Tomo breathing or holotropic breathing or Wim Hof breathing or whatever it is. And I can completely change my experience of the present moment, of what is happening right now. So I can either be on autopilot, or I'm actively participating in the creation of the moment. So, Finian, let's transition now to talk about these key intentions of intentionality that you have laid out in the book. And I know there's 5 critical items there, and the real one, sort of the master one, the meta one, is to focus on the feelings, not just the outcomes. Tell us what that means, and then tell us more about the supporting elements that are in these intentions.
Okay, brilliant. So what I identified was that our subconscious is built on these belief loops. And these belief loops determine the quality of our life, whether our life is thriving or whether they're not. Now, a belief loop in its simplest form, it goes, our beliefs shape our thoughts shape our behaviors result in a feeling, and then that feeling reaffirms the belief, because that is how the subconscious takes on directions on coding. It's through the strongest feeling. That's how all programs have been created. So what I identified was, well, how do we determine whether our life is going great? It's not by all the material achievements, because a lot of people can achieve a lot of achievements and they can be miserable. And what I worked out was it's really the feelings determine our quality of our life. And what ultimately people are hoping when they set a goal or an outcome is they hope that it gives a certain feeling. But most people aren't actually aware of what feeling it is. And sometimes they get it completely wrong. They spend 10 years on this journey and they wake up one day thinking, oh, this is going to be the moment. But they realize it didn't actually give the feeling they wanted. So I don't like wasting that amount of time. I want to feel extraordinary all the time. So I flipped it and said, okay, it's not that outcomes are bad, but they need to come secondary to feelings. So let's prioritize the feelings, and feelings are more expansive. There's lots of different ways you could get a particular feeling. And what that means is, with the fluidity of life, like the different challenges that come up, you can get a feeling even if your plan didn't play out the right way. So that's really the master key. And when you do that, when you prioritize feelings, it takes it in the present moment. So for example, you could say, I want to feel, in my relationship, I want to feel peaceful, playful, and connected. So I connect to that in the morning, and throughout the day, certain instances occur which trigger perhaps old programs. And in that moment, I can activate the circuit breaker, get connected to my higher self, get connected to that desired feeling, and go, okay, peaceful, playful, and connected. What behavior is going to drive me to get a chance of getting that right now? And that may flip a program where I was potentially going to cause a lot of conflict, lose a lot of energy. Instead, I do a new behavior and I create a new program, and ultimately I get the feeling what I want in my life. So that's why it becomes so important. It's really powerful as well to help in leadership for people to make decisions. So one of the most powerful things I learned through the army was the power of the commander's intent, 2 up and 1 up. And ultimately it was very brief. It was like, take all high ground, or attack at all costs, or something like that. And what that meant was if we got separated from the command, and say my lowest soldiers who had the least experience were out in themselves, they didn't know all the strategy, they could lean back on that one thing. And it was a feeling that they were like leaning back onto. So it grounds us to be able to make better decisions in a quicker way. And it also empowers people to go, okay, this is what we're trying to get in the organization. Well, I'm just going to do this. If it's like the feeling is we always want to feel with integrity, then when a certain incident comes up, they don't have to wonder what's the right decision. They know exactly what the right decision, because it will evoke a certain feeling inside of them.
Yeah. And so the key here is to really get to where you want to be at an emotional level, right? So if at the end of the day I'm wanting to experience a feeling, what you're saying, and this resonates with someone who I know both you and I look up to, who's Dr. Joe Dispenza. I mean, he said he's all about this. Like, create the feeling for yourself. Go out there and be it, embody it, and then your world will organize itself around you to create the circumstances that are going to support that. So really what you're doing is you're shooting for the end target, and then you're saying, here's therefore my mind is going to figure out how we're going to get there. And here's how life is going to conspire in my favor. The universe actually has my back and is supportive of me.
Exactly. And that's actually the final part of my book, which is about taking a quantum leap. It's using an accelerant called the scientific manifestation process. And basically, I have a physics and maths background, and I realized, oh, it's all just formulas. What we thought was this airy-fairy concept, there's actually a way to do this. And it's all about understanding that the law of reversibility, and understanding that if you have one, it means you have to have the other. So it's the idea, if you have water, it means you also have ice. If you have ice, you have water. If you have heat, you have motion. If you have motion, you have heat. And I realized I applied that most people focus on the outcome, hoping that it'll give them a feeling. But if you have the feeling, it means you have to have the outcome. It just hasn't materialized into the 3D material realm yet. So flipping that and going, all right, there's a hard way of doing things, which is I've got to do all these activities. I've got to map out this strategy to make this happen. Or you could use a different approach, which is accessing the quantum world, which is the most advanced science and most prevalent in the world right now, which is all about your state of consciousness dictates what happens in your life. And this is where we're seeing very advanced entrepreneurs now. They're doing it in an easier way. And what's funny is athletes have been doing this for a really long time. The greatest athletes, what did they start doing? They stopped training so much, and instead they went into a place of visualization, and they started feeling themselves, the feelings, what it felt like when they crossed the finish line, and how they felt. And then lo and behold, they went and broke a new world record. It was also how we learned how to fly planes in the military. We didn't actually learn in simulators. We went through experience. We would have a broomstick between our legs, and we would actually feel ourselves flying. And then when we actually went up in the plane, it just happened. So military organizations, sport organizations have been using this for a really long time, but for some reason we don't think it applies in the entrepreneurial world. We think, no, business, it has to be hard work. And I'm telling you, there is an easier way. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have to do work. You still have to do the activity, but it's coming from a different place. It's a intuitive place where you're like, oh, of course I have to be on this podcast right now. And you never know where that opens up.
Well, congratulations on the book. I think everyone's excited to see it come out. Tell us about the process. So I know so many entrepreneurs who want to write a book. Tell us about the process. How long did it take you? How did you get Hay House to pick it up? What went behind it? What were your intentions behind getting Intentionality out there?
It's a wonderful story because I practice what I preach. So the book, I think there's a lot of people who are writing books now because they think it's the thing to do and they want an expensive business card. And most books out there are they could be written in one page and they're fluffed up to 250 pages.
As I have said many times, this book could have just been a blog post.
Yes, exactly. So I didn't want to do that. However, I did want to go on a personal journey for myself to write a memoir about my experience. And this wasn't actually the book that's being published, but I went through this process and it was a very healing, cathartic journey. And it's a really great book. Then I started going, okay, now I've got the book. Who would I want to publish this? And it's very challenging when you do this. Everyone's saying, oh, publishers are so hard. You will never get an opportunity with anyone. You'll get 100 rejections. And I just went, that's not the way I operate. And I literally went, the only publisher I'd want is Hay House. and I sat down and I went through the exact manifestation process that I did and got connected to the feeling of what it was like to get a book deal with Hay House. And then what happened is, and this is the third step of the manifestation process, you have to claim it. So as you get insights, you have to act on it. So suddenly, a few days later, I went, I wonder if I have any connections on LinkedIn to anyone who's at Hay House. That insight came through. I looked at it. There was one connection. I had just met her at a speaking conference a few months ago, and I was just drawn to her. And at the end of the conference, we never spoke, but I just came up and I said, I feel drawn to you. Can I give you a big hug? And she loved it. We gave a big hug and we stayed in touch. Funnily enough, she was the connection. I asked her, what's your connection? I went, I just got published by them. And I'd be happy to introduce you because I think your work would be amazing. And I'll connect you to the CEO as well. So then I got onto the phone call with the CEO of Hay House, which is Reed, incredible pioneer of the industry. And when I got on that call, he actually couldn't remember how I got on that call because he doesn't do this with anyone anymore. But after a while, we connected, we dropped in, it was amazing. And he basically sort of pushed it through the team. And they said, look, I'm for you, but I still have a team who has to decide this. And they really loved the book, but they actually said, would you be open to writing another book to make it easier to launch, and then we'll do your memoir afterwards? And I'm a loyal person. I went, whatever you say. So then I went on a year journey writing this book, and that's how it really came to fruition. So I don't have a single rejection. I have one, my dream publisher, but I put a lot of work into this, a lot of intentionality. It wasn't just a casual thing. I knew exactly who I wanted to be with. I created that feeling, and then every opportunity I've jumped on it. I hadn't waited. I've gone, all right, this is what I need to do. I've trusted that intuition. And there was many moments where I could have sabotaged it, but instead I went, nope, I'm going to act on this.
I hope everyone who wants to write a book and bring their voice to the world has as smooth and as easy an experience. That's really cool. I've heard so many of the other story of, struggle and difficulties, which actually leads me into my next question for you, Finnian. One of the things that entrepreneurs carry around with us as we're out there building our businesses and trying to change the world, we carry all sorts of societal beliefs, family beliefs, limiting beliefs, things that are holding us back, things that are acting like a throttle on our personal growth and so often our business growth as well. And I really believe that the two are connected. The more you grow and develop as a person, the more you're able to manifest and create out there in the world. And there's a couple that just come up over and over again in my conversations with entrepreneurs that I want to sort of test with you here and see if how we might address them. But number one is this idea that I have to struggle. I have to struggle. So entrepreneurship is hard. And if I don't have blood on my knuckles and bruises on my face, and it didn't really count, and I have to always give it my all, and I have to have near-death experiences or, whatever the thing is like that, but it's got to be super hard. So that's one that comes up a lot. And by the way, I will say that I am full on 100% guilty of carrying that around with me. The second one is, it's got to take time. Oh, entrepreneurship is a marathon, not a sprint. Anything good is worth waiting for. Whatever you want to, however you want to couch it. The idea is it takes time. I'm ready for a long slog, and the slog's going to be difficult. So we carry this around, this frame of this is how entrepreneurship is. And I'd love to hear, how can we reframe? How can we use the circuit breakers that you're talking about? And what do we then want to reinsert into those limiting beliefs that we're carrying around?
So you're spot on, Alex. And I address these in the book. They're very common ones. So the latter one about time. So I think it's one of the great misconceptions that people often think time is our greatest asset. I actually challenge that. I think energy is our more greatest asset. Energy is what drives everything in our life. And so often we focus on, I wasted someone's time. And I went, no, you actually wasted more. You wasted someone's energy. And why that's important is that time is limited, but energy is unlimited. And you can access greater energy depending on things. So a common thing is people say, I don't have time to do this meditation or breath work or anything like that. And there's an old Zen saying where if you don't have time to meditate for 20 minutes, you need to meditate for an hour. And that idea is that, yes, you may have taken more clock time to be able to do that, but throughout the rest of your day, your psychological time will be so much more powerful. You'll be able to make quicker decisions. You'll be more present. Your energy will be opening up other things. And that's where we get the exponential effect. So what I do when I first work with people, this is the first intention that we work with, really detailed. I just keep focusing on, what are your energy detractors? Because this is another fallacy as well. People always think I need more energy. And I go, no, you don't need more energy. You need to reduce the blockages to the unlimited energy source that we have. We have a superpower grid with the Earth, access to Earth, the sun, air. We have all the energy we need, but we put these blockages physically and emotionally stopping us from receiving that. So I'll give you an example. I have one coaching client right now. She had a good business when she met me. There was a lot of opportunity. I could see how much this business could grow. But the problem is is I could also see how she was going to sabotage this business because of her different beliefs around fear and how it had to be hard. So the first year, we didn't do anything related to business. We completely did a complete personal overhaul because I knew that if we did this, then when it came to the business strategy, we were going to be able to fly. And just recently I said, all right, let's go double, triple your business this year. And she goes, am I ready? And I'm like, oh, you're more than ready. And she will double, or she probably will triple her business this year, which is an example where it doesn't have to be hard. This was now she's suddenly in a place where she's clear, she sees opportunities, she's making decisions, and it's happening so much more expansive than she could ever have imagined. And who knows where this will end up. So that's really that example of leveraging energy over time.
Cool.
Also plays in well with the way it has to be hard and it has to be this grind. It really connects to two other intentions, which is choose love over fear and also embrace discipline over rigidity. So a lot of people think that when they're focusing, they have to be so rigid. And I see these entrepreneurs who make these horrible lifestyles for themselves because they're like, I've got to keep going. They're like, I've got to be online at 8:00 in the morning on a Monday morning instead of going on a great powder day skiing, which would have given them more energy. And rigidity creates an opportunity for things to break. Like if you look at a tree, when a tree is rigid, what happens? Wind comes, a storm comes, and it breaks. But instead, a tree is disciplined in its strength and its grounding, but it has flexibility because life changes all the time. So I focus more on discipline and the idea that it's about momentum. It's about progress. It doesn't matter if you don't do what you want to do every single day, as long as you're moving in the right direction. And that also ties in with the choose love over fear is a lot of people think that if they let go of their stories around hardship and their drivers from their trauma, that they're going to lose their edge. And it's not true at all. It may have got you to where you are right now, but it also may be limiting you from going to the next expansive place. So instead, we tap into a stronger power, stronger vibrational energy, which is love. And suddenly we start realizing that it doesn't actually have to be hard. When we're in this like flow state is the idea that it's not hard. It doesn't mean you're not focused and you're not like really intently doing work, but it's different. It doesn't have to be hard and it doesn't have to be a struggle. And I've definitely seen it in my life. The funny thing was I had a sabbatical for a year and I created more in that year on sabbatical than I've done any other year. It was because I had no pressure. Yeah. I just did when I felt like it. I trusted my intuition. I suddenly got a burst of energy and I went, all right, let's smash out this book. Let's write this new course. Let's do this new keynote. And before I knew it, I built this expansive portfolio again without really trying. And that's where I'm in my state right now. I'm doing more projects than I've ever done before, but I'm doing it with a lot less hustle, a lot less hard. And I notice whenever I'm getting a little bit in that hard work and I'm not getting the results, it tells me that something's gone off with my energy. And instead, I step back and go, okay, what's happening right now? Where am I out of alignment with myself? Because it shouldn't be hard. And often it's, I've got an inner conflict somewhere. And I address that, and then things start opening up again. Now, I still am very, very disciplined. And when I'm working, it's not casual. Like I am focused. I'm there. When you get me on stage, I am everything for you. Like I'm fully committed and I'll go to 4 a.m. if I need to, but it's not a hard state. It's an ease. It's a flow. It's like skiing down a perfect line. If you get rigid, it doesn't really work, but you just get flow with the snow.
People so often confuse discipline, especially when they're pursuing creativity, right? They think discipline makes me not creative. I'm always doing the same things, etc. I find discipline is such a great way to create time and choice and space because a lot of other things that might be occupying my mind or energy are suddenly taken care of because of the discipline itself.
Yeah, and you have to act the discipline to keep catching yourself and seeing, I've activated a negative belief loop and I'm starting to spiral. Now, it's a lot easier to indulge it, become the victim, but before you know it, 4 days have passed, all your energy is depleted, and now it's a really big cost. If you become disciplined in coming back to the breath, always just coming back to the present moment, which is practice presence over comparison. Come back to that present moment, take a breath. You might stop a destruction period. And that's really the most important, is like, you just don't want to get injured physically or emotionally. And if you can catch those things, then life becomes a lot easier. It's that sort of idea of riding the wave. Ride the wave rather than getting dumped.
Nice. What sort of influences have been powerful for you in your life? I hear a lot of the words, and it reminds me of Joe Dispenza or Gay Hendricks or David Hawkins. Who do you tap into for your inspiration?
So I have a lot of authors who are teachers. David Hawkins I reference a lot in my book. Bruce Lipton as well. I have gone to Joe Dispenza retreats, so I appreciate him as well. And then it's nature. Nature is what I appreciate the most. Nature is my greatest teacher, because when I'm in nature, I connect to something bigger than myself, and I connect to this power and this energy, and it creates a new perspective for me. So I spend a lot of time by myself in nature. That's definitely really expansive. And then I'm a student of life. I learn from every experience. I always ask questions. I'm very curious, and I constantly keep reflecting about my own experience as well. So I'm curious about, oh wow, like, you reacted yesterday. Like, what's the program there? Why did that trigger such an emotional response for you? And I feel like that's probably my best path forward.
Mm. Well, I know that you've done so much work to heal yourself, to create the life that you live. I know that wellness is a really big deal for you. Breath work, psychedelics, darkness retreats. I mean, like, literally, the list of stuff that you've done is really, really long. And I know that now you're also involved in a project in Portland called Cascada, which I believe is wellness related. Tell us about that real quick.
It is. This is such an exciting project. It's first of its kind, really, in North America. So what we're doing is we've built a hydrothermal wellness sanctuary and resort. And it has three core pillars. One is the hydrothermal pools. So we have 35,000 square feet of pools, different temperatures. We have some inside, some outside, some dark and quiet. So it's your own like peace and relaxation. And then we have a social area as well. We have contrast therapy with hot, cold. We have different saunas. Then we have a whole suite of wellness classes, including breath work and yoga and meditation. And then we also have a really nice boutique hotel with a hospitality avenue. So it's the idea that most people have to go away for wellness retreats. They have to drive 90 minutes out of town, and it's a remote place, and it's hard to access, and it's really expensive. We want to provide this to the everyday person. So effectively, you can come in and have an oasis, recharge, whether it's through soaking or a wellness class, or even staying in a staycation in the hotel, and really transform yourself. And it's almost a physical manifestation of everything we stand for, intentionality. And it's been a really beautiful journey, because we've got a partnership between three of us, and it's a very conscious partnership. I realized I was fearful of business partners, because I'd heard so many stories in EO and YPO about things going wrong. And I realized that program was stopping me from actually having really great success, because they don't talk about all the great partnerships that have built huge companies in the world. And I reflected, and I went back, well, what is a partnership? It's a relationship. And there's a lot of people who have really bad intimate relationships as well. But we know if you pick the right one, it's the best thing for your life. It's the best thing for longevity, your happiness. And I realized, oh, this is just the same thing in business. You have to be intentional about your partnership. You have to work on it constantly. You have to bring everything up. So we're going through this really expansive space where we're working with coaches. We do a lot of deep personal work. We're sharing, we're bringing our families along on the journey. And I feel like it's the most rewarding piece of work I do. So watch out for Cascada. It's launching in June in Portland. We're also have Bend, Oregon. We've already purchased the land there. We're building, and we have a vision to become the leading hospitality and wellness brand in the world. And it's so exciting. It's really nice to be riding the wave of wellness, and people are finally paying attention and realizing this is my most important asset, is my own wellness.
Fantastic. That sounds like a really remarkable project, and congrats on putting that together. Finnian Kelly, thanks also for joining us on this incredible discussion of intentionality. Congrats on your book that's coming out, and thanks for being a leader in this field. It's such a pleasure to have you on the Conscious Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate your platform.